Currently, we are studying about the evolution of management or how it is evolved. In it particularly, we are studying the scientific management theory. Yesterday, we have discussed about Taylor's management, Taylor's scientific management. So let's discuss something about Taylor. Taylor was a machinist, a shop floor person, and he rose to become a chief engineer of his steel company. His idea of scientific management was opposed and he was asked to present a critique in front of the company's representatives. So he took an example of coal processing, and in coal processing particularly the loading and unloading of coal. So it is a simple process, but Taylor said that in it also science is involved. So how science is involved? Firstly, if what amount or quantity of coal is to be taken. For example, if we take large amount of coal, we will get tired easily and the output will be less. So for this also he conducted an entire experiment. For instance, if it takes 2x amount of coal in one go and then calculate its output, and after reducing the load to be taken in one go, the fatigue level will start decreasing and the worker will be able to take more amount of coal. And after reducing, there will come a point when the productivity of the worker will be the highest. And after further reducing, let's say X point, and after that the productivity will be starting decreasing. So there is an optimal point, that is X point, and he said at this point the amount of coal is to be taken by all the workers. For the upliftment of coal, we need a shovel. So the process of shoveling of coal. So he said for shoveling of coal also we need a study, and he called this time and motion study. For time and motion study, and he said that he has a better approach, and he said instead of using the wrist, we should throw our whole body weight to the when we are throwing the shovel, and we should use our shoulder instead of using the wrist. And then if we use the shoulder, then we will get less fatigue and outcome will be more. So after conducting this experiment of coal processing, he was able to conclude 4 principles. The first principle is that there is a best way of doing any particular job. The second principle is that we need to select the right person for a suitable work and then train them. The third principle is that the selected worker should be motivated to perform his best work and increase productivity, and for that we need a compensation system. He called it as piece rate system. So what is piece rate system? In piece rate system, we pay the worker in terms of unit performed, not in terms of time consumed. For example, Aligarh lock industry uses piece rate system. The fourth principle is that there is a clear division of work, that is the managers will think and the worker will do. There is a close coordination between managers and workers. We must appreciate the idea and system proposed by Taylor after doing deep and thorough study. For instance, if we look at an experiment which almost lasted for over 23 years, and that experiment was of producing an ideal tool for cutting. So from these things we can see that he was really going deep into the issues. Naturally, he was not alone in doing these tasks, but a group of persons were involved in it. But he became famous because he was the most prominent proponent of this idea, and that's why he is called the father of scientific management. Henry Ford was one of the most cited and earliest exponent of his idea, and he used all his ideas and got wonderful results. For instance, we have discussed earlier also that he was able to produce a car in a minute, and in fact in 1920 he was able to produce a car in 5 seconds. So the assembly line should be done in such a manner that all the processes should be done in 5 seconds. Lastly, I want to conclude my discussion with this statement that every idea has a gestation period, and that when it becomes mature and then declines. Thank you.
Next, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Zoya Khalid, and let's do a quick recap of what we studied in the previous class. In the previous class, we studied the scientific management by Taylor. Taylor, also known as the father of the scientific management. He and his associates were the first one to study the work in a scientifically way. They studied how work was performed and what effect they put on the workers' productivity. He also studied the time and motion. He also conducted time and motion study to find out how much time is required to do a particular job and how many motions are involved to do it. Because the number of motions vary from person to person. And in the case of labor, he found out the problem that the laborers were doing the job the way they want to do. There was no such particular way to do a job. So basically, he focused on the belief that making the workers work as hard as they can is not as effectively as optimizing the way the work should be done. So therefore he focused on the belief that there should be one particular way by which the job should be done, so that this will increase the effectivity and productivity and will ultimately save the time and human energy. So there are 4 principles of the scientific management. The first one is science to do every job. This principle focuses that to increase the effectiveness of organization, every small single work should be done scientifically and the work should be analyzed scientifically. He believes that even a small work like loading paper sheets into a boxcar should be done scientifically. So this will save time, human energy, and give good results. The second one is select the person and train them. The effectiveness of the organization depends on the ability of the employees it has. So implementing proper training and making them introduce the new technologies will brush up their skills, and to ensure that these training is provided to the right person, the selecting and the recruiting of these employees should be done wisely. The third is pay per price. The payment to the workers should be done according to the work of amount they are doing. So this will encourage them to do their work in a more managed manner and to do the work in the best possible way they should do. And the fourth one is harmony. The relationship between the workers and the management should be cordial. The difference between the two will not be beneficial to each other. Both the manager and the workers should acknowledge each other and should support each other. So that's all. Thank you.
So these were very good recaps by Zishan and Zoya. Maybe just a few suggestions regarding the body language to Zishan. Zishan, you may be slightly more, you may have a more expressive, if I can use that word, expressive body language. You communicate the ideas very clearly and you have a good command over language, but your body language should speak more or should support your verbal communication even more, and that would be good for you. Okay.
Okay, sir.
And as regards Zoya, she was expressive with her body. In fact, for example, she was moving her head during the course of presentation to explain the ideas. All those gestures were supporting your verbal communication. Now, next you can make this also as a kind of point of reflection, that how can I be more, alert and more energetic while making the presentation. You are doing a good job, but overall, we could be more enthusiastic while making a presentation. The energy level could be slightly higher, okay? And that would make a even more impact on the audience. Okay. So coming to the idea of Taylor, which we are discussing, and we have also highlighted his. He was a man with a mission, isn't it? And only a man who is inspired by a mission, who has a calling actually, can go so deep into issues. And such was his contribution. Even now, his insights we continue to use them. Whenever a process-based work is to be organized, there are a series of steps that are to be performed for doing a job. Taylor's scientific management insights will always come handy. As some of us know about that phrase, that old wine in the new bottle, there are many new ideas which are being proposed. Like, for example, business process re-engineering. There is a term which is now very popular with the management professionals. But actually, if you look into the core of it, it is nothing but scientific management in a more catchy phrase. So there are many people who have benefited from the insights that Taylor gave, and this contribution must be acknowledged. Now let us come to the critique. Having highlighted its relevance and the effort that has gone into it, but we have also made this point that each theory is a product of its times. And when times undergo change, the theory becomes not that relevant. And how times changed, scientific management theory was primarily evolved keeping expanding markets in mind. So when industrial revolution took place, the issue was production. There were always enough people to buy what you are producing. And so was the case with many of the large corporations which were established and were producing products like cotton, for example, cloth, or let us say automobiles. So when there are enough takers and the market is expanding, the idea would work well. But what happens, and you all know, in 1915, something happened to this world. And what was that?
The Great Depression.
Yeah. Now, prior to Great Depression, we had the First World War.
First World War.
Isn't it? No, when there is a war going on, will people be interested in buying automobiles?
No.
Naturally not, isn't it? So people will be actually struggling for getting a square day's meal. And you may offer a car at a dirt cheap price. And you may say that, this car was selling at $640. Now I'm offering you at $320. But will people buy? So actually people didn't buy. They stopped buying the cars which you are producing with so much of efficiency. So you may actually be most efficient person around. And you may be rolling out one car every 5 seconds. But if there are no takers of that product, what is the use? And as a result of it, the inventory started piling up. It is said that in case of Ford Motors also, their entire plant was, full of cars, and they were just not going out because the market didn't need it. So this is one factor which has undergone change. And because of that, scientific management approach of Taylor lost its relevance in this shrinking market, in the recession-based economy. So World War first followed by recession, and people are struggling. If some of you are fond of reading novels, the novels of, let us say, Harold Robbins. That period is depicted very vividly, and how human life was changed, and what sufferings the war caused. Now, in that, actually, scientific management school became irrelevant, because that production was no longer needed. But having said that, there were some other inherent limitations of scientific management. And those limitations I will explain with the help of a case study. Something which happened in another very powerful company of the day, IBM. What happened in IBM, the company's founder, Johnson, he was also a legend of his times. So what happened that they had organized the production as per the principles of scientific management only. And they were into producing devices like electronic calculators and those kind of office equipments which smoothen the office work. So this fellow Johnson was once taking a round of the factory, and he went to a lady who was sitting on her machine but not working. And naturally, Johnson asked her why she's not working, why she's sitting just like that. And then that lady made a statement, and she said, I am waiting for the setup man to arrive. So Johnson asked, why you are waiting? Can't you do it yourself? She said, yes, I can set the machine. I have been operating it for long. But I am not supposed to do it, because it is somebody else's job. So I'm not doing it. So this was one incident. And when Johnson said, no, go ahead, no problem. If you can set the machine, you set it, and then get going. Start work. Why lose the work? Waiting for the setup man to arrive. So this is one incident which happened in this company, IBM. Then there was second incident, again from the same company. And it so happened that they were working on the design of a calculator, which was an advanced calculating machine. But it so happened that the R&D team which was working on it got quite late in coming up with the design, and there was a pressure from the market to supply that item. So as a result of this, the management took a pragmatic decision, and they said, whatever the design you have worked out, just give it to us, that, and rest of the details we will work out on the shop floor. And the workers were given that half-baked design of that product. Now what the engineers found and the R&D people found, that the design that finally emerged as a result of the workers' involvement and tinkering with the whole design was a far superior product that they could ever conceive of. Now this has a very important implication. What do you think could be the learning from these two incidents? Can we have some observations in the light of this, what I have shared?
As you've told, before the devil is in the details. The people who are making the product actually got more familiar and knew how to make the design which will be more user friendly and all. So they came up with the optimum design. While the designers who were sitting in a room could not get it done.
And what about the first incident which was described where the lady was waiting for the setup man to arrive? Can somebody comment on that also?
Sir, sometimes it's not necessary to follow the strict chain of command, and as and when the situation requires, sometimes command can be skipped or decisions can be taken by subordinates for faster work or better work.
We should have the knowledge and will to do some other work also that we are operating on.
We have to adapt to the conditions.
The lady had the willingness. It was not that she was a lousy worker and she was finding a scapegoat for not doing what she could have done. But she was simply, under this impression, clear impression that there is division of labor and I am supposed to do this and somebody else is supposed to do this, and I am not expected to intrude into other person's work.
Is lack of sense of responsibility, sir.
Again, I would say we would be making too much of a judgment because she was a competent person. Because finally, when she was asked to do it, she did it. But her only, doubt was that should she intrude into somebody else's work? Because maybe the organization thought that maintenance of the machine, the proper oiling and all has to be somebody else's responsibility. So maybe they have evolved a system whereby before the machine starts for the day, somebody will come and check whether it is in working order or it requires some lubrication here and there, and whether the amount of electricity which it should get, it is getting it in the right proportion, whatever. That is the job of the setup man. And the lady, in her good wisdom, judgment, thought that she should not intrude into somebody else's work. And that is why she was waiting. So the point, I think, because now we are presenting a critique of Taylor's work, this gives an impression. We have already made that point that Taylor made a very clear distinction between management's work and the workers' work. The management will think and workers will do. So somebody in management must have thought about it that these are two separate jobs. The running of the machine and setting up of the machine. And again, we cannot question that basic logic of this decision. But the point is, they may be two separate jobs. But should they be performed by two separate individuals?
It depends on the workload.
So if you think that it is expedient that the operator who is running the machine will be responsible for its maintenance also, because somebody who is already tending a machine, is working on that machine, will have a feel for the machine, and in fact he is likely to have, or she is likely to have, a greater ownership on the machine. It is my machine, I have to maintain it. Not only run it, but to maintain it also. So this was one of the blind spot of Taylor. That I don't know whether he had this thing in mind, that thinking and doing are two separate jobs. and they should be performed by two different persons. But the point is that when it comes to actual work, should this division be so clear-cut? And suppose there is a problem which arises in the machine, and the lady feels confident that I can sort out this problem. Should she not have the freedom to do it? Minor repairs, for example, she can carry out on her own. If a bolt needs tightening or whatever, I mean, whatever is the minor repair required, she can do it. So this is, I think, one very important insight which we need to have in mind, that thinking and doing are actually two separate parts of the job, but they may not necessarily be performed by two different individuals. Breaking apart and putting it together, both are important. So as a result of those time and motion studies, we have broken apart all the tasks into individual components. But is there a need to reintegrate them again so that the workers have a whole feel? And let me describe you one more situation which is even more, expressive of this idea. And the situation was like this, that there was a cotton mill, and in cotton, when we produce cotton, there are spindles on which the thread moves, and there were such cotton bales which were moving regularly, and there was an aisle, a huge aisle, and at two extreme ends the two workers were standing and the spindles were moving. The only job of these two workers was that they have to keep an eye on the moving spindles, and if at any stage the thread gets broken, they have to reach to that spindle and tie that thread so that it can move again. Have you visualized this? So if you visualize this process, just think of the man who is tying the knots. Will the person enjoy that job, doing it repeatedly over the years, 365 days in a year?
No, sir.
Just tying the knot? So, do we use human beings wisely when we just use a very small component of the skill? Just because we have analyzed that tying the knot is one task and it has to be assigned to one individual? So the point that we have made earlier, somebody made this point yesterday, that when we extend an idea too heavily, and I wonder whether Taylor wanted it to be that way. But what happens is, many of us who are exponents of an idea, we become more loyal than the king. And for example, Henry Ford के बारे में कहा जाता है कि असेंबली लाइन टेक्नोलॉजी उसके दिमाग का ऐसा हिस्सा बन गई थी कि वो they had a production achievement, they had a production breakthrough, and because of which they were able to expedite the production. So they organized a celebration in the factory to celebrate that breakthrough innovation. And you'll be amused that when the lunch was served to the celebrating persons, the lunch was served on a conveyor belt. So the point that I'm trying to make through this apparently amusing incident is that assembly line had gone so much deep into the psyche of the persons that they perhaps became such an exponent of this approach that they lost touch with the larger reality. And the larger reality here was that human beings perform individual motions very poorly. Especially if you ask them to do it repetitively, they will get bored. Because they are not just a pair of fingers who would tie the knot. They are human beings. They come with a brain which thinks. So if you just ask them, you come to the factory and keep aside your brains, better leave it at your home and just come with your pair of fingers, will they enjoy that kind of eventuality? So when we hire a hand, the person comes with it. And it would be very poor engineering if we just end up using the hands of the person and not the mind of the person. So this is another very serious criticism of Taylor, that perhaps, I don't know whether he intended it like this or not, but the way it was practiced, it caused a lot of boredom, lot of monotony. And overall, workers lost interest in the work. Yes, work would be pleasurable because it brings you dollars and you support your family with those dollars. But people want meaning out of their work also. Just imagine a situation when a worker goes back home and tells his family that today I have tied 100 knots. As opposed to that, if he get a feeling or if he goes back to his home and says, today I produced 1,000 meters of cloths. Now, which one would be a better proposition? What do you think?
1,000 meters.
Because when he says that I have produced so much of cloth, he will have a sense of meaning. Yes, I am doing something meaningful. I am producing cloth which would be used by people. Versus today I have tied 100 knots. So this is, I think, a very serious limitation of Taylor, that it unnecessarily created a division between planning and doing. And he or his exponents pushed the idea to such an extreme that individual tasks were so clearly identified that when those tasks were performed repeatedly, it caused a lot of monotony and boredom among the workers. And they lost the meaning in the work. And it became just a kind of routine motion that they have to perform each day. And a lot of drudgery then gets involved. It caused a lot of fatigue. And people lost interest in the industrial work. And only, the compensation that they get in the end was the only consolation that they had. So this was, I think, not a desired thing to happen. And at this juncture, I think I'll present before you a PPT slide which summarizes all the points that I am presenting to you or explain to you. So what is the critique? Can somebody read it for me?
Yes, sir.
Please read it out.
Scientific management, or for that any approach, is a product of its times. When the context changed, the limitations of that approach become evident.
Is this point clear? Is this point clear?
Yes, sir.
Anyone having any doubt on this? Yes. Now, next point, please.
SM approach was relevant in when markets were expanding, but during recession, markets shrunk.
So that was, I've said, I've told you the critique from the point of view of how the context changed and the approach became not that relevant, isn't it? The next 2 points are related to the inherent problems in scientific management. And please read it out.
Human beings do individual motions poorly. Man's specific contribution is always to integrate, to balance, to measure, to judge. Another blind spot of SM is divorce of planning from doing.
So is this point clear?
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
So can you please clear the last point? Divorce of planning from doing.
I've already told you that one of the salient feature or salient principle of Taylor scientific management was that managers will plan and workers will do. Isn't it?
Sir?
Now,
Hello, sir.
Yes.
Sir, about the third point, we say practice makes a man perfect. So with time, the person will become more efficient.
Very true. I would use another expression for this. Practice makes man perfect. And one more thing, I've read a adage which says, hand is the cutting edge of mind. Hand is the cutting edge of mind. So when somebody works with his hands, his mind also gets activated. And he gets a lot of ideas. Isn't it? So if we are not able to incorporate that insight into our planning, we are not using the human beings wisely. Isn't it? So any engineering approach which does not use this ability of human beings, their ability to integrate, to balance, to measure, to judge, to improvise. I would add one more word, to improvise on what they are already doing through their hands.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So that engineering would be a very wretched and poor engineering if it is not able to incorporate the insight of the person who is on the shop floor, who is working. And because of that work, he is getting ideas. Isn't it? And the second point is actually an extension of this, because somehow it was thought that planning is the job of managers and doing is the job of workers. So managers will plan and workers will do. So there was a division, so clear-cut division. But actually you all know when you work, you get a lot of ideas for planning. Imagine the situation when I am engaging a class, and in some of the educational institutions it happens. Somebody else sets the syllabus, especially in universities which have huge affiliating colleges. There are, for example, you have a college, you have a university near your home, Agra University, what is called now Baba Bhimrao Ambedkar University. And it has a huge number of colleges. For example, our own DS College or Vaishnav College, they are part of the Agra University. So somebody in the university sets the syllabus and the teacher in DS College is supposed to deliver that. He has no role in the framing of the syllabus. And there is a very tedious process through which the syllabus change occurs. Now, as opposed to that, think of a situation in which I am in, for example. I am in a very blessed situation on that account. I teach a course, let us say management concept. If the Board of Studies has passed this course, Board of Studies of my department, in which I am also a member, if it has passed this course, And next year I decide that I want to change the syllabus a bit because the times have changed. For example, suppose I want to bring insights from the world, how world has changed from COVID as a result, and I want to bring this insight into the course. Now, no chairman can stop me from doing it. No vice chancellor can stop me from doing it. I have full freedom. So a system which trusts the teachers and says to them that they can plan their course and they can deliver it also as per their thought process, what they feel is good. Will that not be a good situation? As opposed to a situation where somebody else sets the syllabus and you just teach that. So, unfortunately, this is what happened with scientific management. That it pushed the idea of, division of labor amongst workers and management too heavily, and as a result of it, there was a clear cleavage between planning and doing. And that is why the approach perhaps developed some inherent limitations. Okay. Any other observation or query that you might have? Actually, this entire idea of scientific management is based on an approach of a concept of man. The view of the man as, they may not say it in so many words, but the basic concept of a person in this approach is that human beings are economic entities. They will work to maximize their profits. They work to maximize their self-interest. And the self-interest was measured in terms of the compensation they get at the end of the day. So they devised a system whereby a person has an ability to earn more, and actually it resulted in a lot of financial well-being of the workers. And in some cases their compensation went up as much as by 60%, 70%. Because now their output was specifically measured. But in the process, another thing happened. Human beings are not just economic entities. They have some other needs also, which we will discuss as we progress in this course. For example, human beings have a need to belong to others, social beings. So if there is a recession and one of my fellow employee loses a job and I am able to retain it, will I feel happy about this situation? Will I feel not sad for my friend who has lost the job? The concept of economic man would suggest, why should you bother? Because your job is intact. What is so bad if your friend has lost a job? Do human beings have such clear-cut needs, economic needs? So this is, I think, we need to appreciate that we have to have a holistic approach, and that is where we will move on to the second school of management thought, which is called the human relations school of thought, okay? Which was the second school which emerged. So, Dr. Zareen, have we already worked out the volunteers? I think you have already circulated the list.
Yes, sir. Okay. Tomorrow, sir, yes, I also posted in the message box. Sabah Qamar, And Mukul Sharma shall be presenting the recap tomorrow, sir.
Are they present today?
Yes, sir, they are present.
Okay. चलिए, okay, we call it a day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.